Instead, Bailey's teammate, Susan Dunkley, decided to get creative. She was competing in Europe, where biathlon is the most watched winter sport on television. So she made a sticker and put it on her rifle, right in the spot where the TV cameras zoom in.
And I said, millions of viewers, your ad here.
It worked. She picked up 2 endorsement deals with overseas companies. We head out to the biathlon range near Dunkley's home in Craftsbury, Vermont. Biathlon requires 2 totally opposite skills. All-out exertion in cross-country ski racing, where you push your body to the limit, and then an immediate pivot to relaxed, precise control in the shooting stages. As Dunkley explains, imagine running up 10 flights of stairs as hard as you can, and then trying to thread a needle. When I visit in November, there's no snow to ski on, so Dunkley and her teammates run hard through the woods and uphill.
Okay, approaching the range. Trying to take some nice deep breaths. Prepare for shooting.
They'll be shooting .22 caliber rifles, aiming at targets 50 meters away.
Whole thing. I'm gonna inhale, exhale onto the target and take the shot.
The key is to slow your heart rate down, steady your hands, and calm your nerves.
Yeah, that time I hit 5 for 5, which is satisfying.
Susan Dunkley has great endurance genes. Her father was a 2-time Olympic cross-country skier. She competed in cross-country in college. When she was recruited for biathlon, the shooting part felt totally alien.
I remember going to the shooting range the very first day and loading the magazine and then shooting and smelling gunpowder. It was just a really foreign smell that didn't belong there, you know? And now I never notice it.
But last fall, things changed. The mass shooting in Las Vegas forced her to think about her sport in a new and painful way.
I just had this disgust about anything gun-related. And it really took away the joy that I enjoy doing my sport, you know? Just thinking about that and the whole gun culture and stuff. And it almost makes me want to just put the rifle down and never touch it again.
Still, her passion for biathlon pulls her back. And to help build the sport she loves, this Olympic athlete spends time coaching little kids in Vermont.
Big breath in, big breath out.
Hoping to inspire the next generation of biathletes.
Relax onto the target.
Melissa Block, NPR News.
Thanks. Nice job. Sweet. Bring some gloves next time, huh?
And now to that game that happened last night.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
That's how it felt to NPR's Gene Demby, like it was for him, for his family, for his city. He grew up in South Philly, and as an adult he says his relationship with football is complicated, but that didn't take anything away from what he felt late in the fourth quarter.
Brady gets hit, the ball is out, and Philadelphia has it.
I don't remember the next 20 seconds of my life. I just blacked out. I was yelling so loudly. Everyone else watching was just jumping up and down. I called my mom, and she picked up. And I whispered, I was like, Mom, we're going to win the Super Bowl. And she started giggling. I still can't believe we won the Super Bowl. And I felt concentration of joy for several minutes, like to the point where I felt like I was going to like pass out. And we went outside, we walked down Broad Street. Some dude sets up some fireworks right on the corner. People just running down the street with Eagles flags, standing on top of garbage trucks around City Hall. There were people climbing on everything that was like jutting out of the ground. On top of statues, on top of light fixtures, on top of street signs. And there were people chanting, you know, the Eagles fight song, Fly, Eagles Fly. Eagles fly. E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles. And I feel like the Phillies have white fans. The Sixers have a fan base that is more diverse, but is much younger. But everybody in Philadelphia is an Eagles fan, right? It's like it cuts across a lot of demographic lines, across ages and across races and across economic locations. And so there's a way in which understanding Philadelphia means like understanding the Philadelphia Eagles. And as a Philadelphian, like when I think about the block I was raised on and the woman who raised me, I think, I don't know, I was just so happy for us. That I was so happy and proud to be from this place, you know?
That's Gene Demby, correspondent and co-host of NPR's Code Switch podcast.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
And this is WNYC. More All Things Considered coming up. And later tonight, Radio Lab will kick off WNYC's Monday evening lineup at 8 with an experiment so slow you can stare at it for hours without seeing the slightest movement. Plus a peek inside the inhumanely fast world of high-speed trading. And then a physicist masters the fastest thing in the universe. Then Krista Tippett welcomes a rabbi and an imam to On Being to explore what each tradition can teach the other and how to build common ground in our fractured religious landscape. It's our Monday evening lineup. It starts tonight at 8 with Radio Lab on 93.9 FM WNYC. It's 31 degrees at 5 o'clock.
Support for NPR comes from WNYC members and from the Brown University School of Professional Studies, offering mid-career professionals executive master's degrees in business administration, healthcare leadership, science and tech, and cybersecurity. Brown.edu/professional studies. Hiscox Insurance, providing customized insurance for small and medium businesses so they can do more and be more. Learn more at hiscox.com or from an agent. Hiscox Insurance, encourage courage. And Epson, with the EcoTank 4750 printer for business, comes with up to 2 years of ink in the box for printing up to 11,000 pages. Cartridge-free printing with EcoTank at epson.com/EcoTank Public Radio.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM, New York.
The stock market went through a whipsaw trading session today, falling as much as 1,500 points, the biggest drop in the history of the index. I'm Jamie Floyd. This is All Things Considered on WNYC. The Syrian regime is ramping up its air campaign.
Local activists are saying that in the north of the country, in the province of Idlib alone, there was over 150 airstrikes in the space of a few hours on Sunday night.
Complete coverage is coming right up. Plus, President Trump took memo madness on the road as Democrats fight to release a counter memo. And a Super Bowl ad featuring the words and voice of Martin Luther King Jr. has reignited the debate over the proper use of his speeches. Who decides and why? We'll find out after news headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Wall Street accelerated its losses dramatically today, with the Dow falling 1,175 points by the close. That's a 4.6% drop. NPR's Yuki Noguchi reports markets have more than erased the gains so far this year.
The market's downward spiral began midday and continued to accelerate as the sell-off that began last week continued. At one point during the day, the Dow was down nearly 1,600 points. Investors are worried about higher costs of doing business generally and of borrowing money. The Dow is down more than 8.5% since hitting its all-time high on January 26th. And Japanese and European markets have also erased their gains on the year. Market volatility increased last week, especially after the government's January jobs report showed strong growth in wages. That sparked worries the Federal Reserve could raise interest rates faster than anticipated. Yuki Noguchi, NPR News, Washington.
The U.S. Supreme Court has left in place a Pennsylvania State Supreme Court order to redraw the congressional lines for the elections this fall. As NPR's Nina Totenberg reports, the state court earlier this month declared that congressional lines are a GOP partisan gerrymander so extreme it violated the state constitution.
Justice Samuel Alito, who handles emergency appeals from Pennsylvania, denied the appeal from state GOP legislative leaders to block the state court order. The fact that Alito, one of the court's most conservative members, rejected the request without even forwarding it to the full court is a sign of how little merit he believed the appeal had. That's because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision was based on the state constitution, not the federal constitution. Alito's action is certain to set off a mad scramble in the state legislature, where some legislators have said they would not comply with the state Supreme Court's order to draw new congressional maps by this Friday. state court said it would do it itself if the state legislature did not. Nina Tottenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Larry Nassar, the former USA Gymnastics doctor convicted of sexually abusing athletes for decades, was sentenced today in Michigan to a term of up to 125 years in prison. This is his third sentence in as many months. Now, this sentence will run concurrently with an earlier sentence in a different Michigan county of 40 to 175 years in prison for sexual assault, but those sentences will be served in addition to a 60-year sentence for child pornography. Today, Justice Janice Cunningham told the 54-year-old Nassar there was no evidence he could be reformed.
You are a doctor. You took an oath to do no harm, and you have harmed over 256 women, and that is beyond comprehension.
Nassar also worked at Michigan State University. Brutal day on Wall Street, recapping the Dow plunging 1,175 points. That's a 4.6% drop. The NASDAQ was down 273. This is NPR.
And you're listening to WNYC in New York. I'm Jamie Floyd. Local media reporting that a financially struggling livery driver committed suicide outside City Hall today. The New York Daily News and other outlets saying the man posted comments on Facebook hours before his death stating that increased competition from companies like Uber and other services had made it increasingly difficult for him to earn a living. Police did say a man drove up to City Hall's East Gate at 7:30 a.m. in a black sedan and shot himself, but police would not give out his name until family is contacted, and authorities saying it appears to have been an isolated incident. A coalition of educators bringing lessons from Black Lives Matter into the classroom this week. Tyralyn Little helped organize lessons inspired by the racial justice movement. She says the week of events is meant to make Black History Month feel more relevant to young students.
Is that it's not just about learning history, but it's also thinking about what are we doing now and what can we continue to do. And so I think that's where it connects, but also moves Black History Month forward.
Dozens of teachers in New York City have signed on to teach lessons on Black identity and social movements. The week of events is taking place in several cities across the country. And in New Jersey, for the first time in over 20 years, the city of Newark is back in control of its schools. The state of New Jersey took over Newark schools 23 years ago after a damning report exposed corruption, mismanagement, and poor performance across the district. Star Ledger reporter Karen Yee says the plan was to reform the schools, but many locals resented the state's approach.
Newark was a petri dish for reform. The state would come in, try a new program, try a new curriculum, throw it out in a year or two. So there was a lot of change, not a lot of time to adjust to some of the change.
Yee says local and state government worked together to return schools to local control. Tonight it will be increasingly cold and lows will be down in the low 20s. Currently 31 degrees, mostly clear skies over Central Park at 5:06.
Support for NPR comes from Vital Projects Fund, supporting the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan, where the exhibition Tarsila do Amaral, Inventing Modern Art in Brazil, opens February 11th. More info at MoMA.org.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Stocks whipsawed today. At one point, the Dow fell nearly 1,600 points. It ended the day down 1,175 points, or 4.6%. That is a record drop in points. Just in the past week, the market has had a number of big sell-offs. And this is a dramatic shift for a market that seemed to be going nowhere but up for more than a year now. NPR senior business editor Uri Berliner is here with us in the studio. And Uri, what happened today?
It was just a really sharp and jittery sell-off, especially late in the day. In fact, investors were just dumping out of stocks. They were in free fall, and this is something we've seen very little of in recent years, basically since the bull market started back in 2009. And now we're seeing nerves back in the market and fear. You know, as you mentioned, the Dow was down more than 4%, and so was the S&P 500, which is a broader index of stocks. Those are very significant drops, the biggest one-day declines for both since 2011. And now this sell-off started last week, but really accelerated today. It was just a very unsettling, weird day.
Why do you say weird?
Well, because there's not one obvious factor that you can point to what's causing the market to shift so dramatically. You know, we've seen some signs that inflation's picking up and interest rates are starting to tick up too. Why does that matter? Well, if interest rates go up, it makes it harder for companies to borrow and invest. It makes your mortgage more expensive, could make your mortgage more expensive. But rates are still low by historical standards, and corporate earnings, they're really strong and mostly beating expectations. So that should be good for stocks.
Do you think people should start worrying about their investments, their retirement accounts?
Well, a lot of financial professionals are saying this sell-off is essentially healthy. They say stock prices are letting off steam, and that's better than if they continue to rise and pop like a balloon that's been overinflated. But as always, psychology is going to be critical here. Even if prices fall more, maybe 10% or more, and then investors start coming back in looking for bargains, that would be one thing. But if fear takes over the market, then this could get pretty ugly.
How do you measure whether fear is taking over the market or not?
Well, one way is to look at volatility. Are there big swings in prices? There's this measurement called the Volatility Index, or VIX, and that's used as an indicator for fear in the market. A lot of people watch the VIX really closely during the financial crisis. Well, the VIX has been very placid for the past year. It's almost been comatose. Essentially, there's been no fear in the market. Today, though, the VIX surged and is now above its historical average.
Give us some perspective here. The Dow fell 1,175 points today, which is the biggest point drop ever. Does that mean it was one of the worst days ever in the market?
No, not by a long shot. Keep in mind that the Dow has risen very high. Last month it was above 26,000. So today's drop in percentage terms is not even close to being the worst day ever. We had much worse during the dot-com collapse and, of course, during the financial crisis.
Does a stock market drop like this mean the economy is going to head in the same direction?
Not necessarily. Economic fundamentals are still strong. We had a stellar jobs report on Friday. Jobs are plentiful right now. Wages are starting to grow. And we've seen workers starting to get some bonuses and pay increases following the tax bill. So the stock market and the economy don't always move in the same direction. For now, fundamentals are good, but if companies get really nervous about a fall in their share prices, we could see that start to change.
NPR's Uri Berliner, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Uri.
The Syrian civil war intensified over this past weekend with heavy airstrikes by the Syrian government and its Russian ally against rebel areas. The strikes were in largely civilian areas, hitting homes and hospitals. We're joined now by NPR's Ruth Sherlock to talk about these airstrikes. She's following this from Beirut. Hi, Ruth.
Hello.
I know you've been able to talk to some people already in these areas that have been under attack. What are they saying about the conditions there?
Well, they're saying that this is the most intense air campaign that's happened since the start of this year. And local activists are saying that in the north of the country, in the province of Idlib alone, there was over 150 airstrikes in the space of a few hours on Sunday night. Of course, that's not an exact figure, but we can say that clearly there were heavy barrages of attacks on towns across the province. And the curious thing is that they hit areas far away from the front line. So in kind of where civilians live, I spoke with Raed Faris, an activist who runs a local radio station in Kaframbil. That's a town where a hospital was hit, and it's a pretty bad phone line, but he's talking about those moments when he woke up to the sound of the bombs.
They attacked the hospital 4 times. It's very close to us, so it was hard to wake up on this sound. Everything was shaking.
So there he's saying that the hospital was hit with 4 different airstrikes on Sunday morning. And he sent me pictures of that hospital that was entirely gutted and walls broken down. And he said that 15 other buildings were also hit in the town. And in another town nearby called Marat El Numan, there was another hospital that was reportedly hit. Activists were posting videos of babies who were struggling for breath after they were ripped out of incubators to be evacuated. And there are also attacks in another area near Damascus that's rebel held. It's an area under siege, and they said that there was estimates of at least 29 people killed from airstrikes there.
Why are these attacks happening in these particular areas? I mean, how do they fit into the larger civil war?
Well, Idlib is one of 2 of the last major rebel enclaves in the country, and it's where pro-opposition families have fled to as the regime has made gains in other parts of the country. And it was seen as a kind of safe area, but since Christmas, the regime has been making a concerted effort to try to take this area back.
The kind of immediate cause was that opposition groups shot down a Russian fighter jet, and so the Russians have said that they responded with what they called precision airstrikes. But there's also a wider context here, which is that the Russians had arranged peace talks in January that they hoped would move things forward, but the Syrian opposition boycotted those talks. And so analysts I've spoken to say, this may be an attempt at sort of taking revenge on areas that are sympathetic to that opposition.
And there are reports that these airstrikes are dropping chemical weapons. Is that really happening?
Yes, that's right. There are reports that in a town in Idlib province, again called Sarakib, there were chlorine gas bombs that were dropped. A group called the Syrian American Medical Society said there were 11 patients, and the White Helmet Volunteer Rescuers, this rescue group that operates in the area, said that people had suffocating symptoms, and there's videos showing people choking as they're hosed down with water to try to remove the effects of the gas.
We've seen chemical weapons used in this war before, and it's been raised with the international community. What has been done? What is being done?
Well, today, Nikki Haley, the United States ambassador to the UN, raised this at the UN Security Council and expressed her frustration that not more is being done. She pointed the finger at Russia, that has consistently vetoed any UN Security Council efforts to take action on this, and indeed the joint investigative mechanism that was investigating these attacks. So a lot of frustration at the moment, but no concerted plan of action.
That's NPR's Ruth Sherlock from Beirut. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you very much.
Saudi Arabia's government recently staged an anti-corruption campaign and came away with $106 billion. The corruption crackdown put some of the kingdom's wealthiest people in detention in a luxury hotel. Most of those people were released a little over a week ago, and now there are a lot of questions about what the government hoped to accomplish and how badly it needs the money. Here's NPR's Jackie Northam.
Stories about the endemic corruption in Saudi Arabia are legendary. Jean-Francois Sesnick, a Gulf state expert at the Atlantic Council, says huge government contracts are routinely inflated to double or triple their value. The largesse then shared among government officials and businessmen, and especially the royal family.
Especially in the security issues, in any kind of deal in the real estate, it was traditional to have the royal family get their pound of flesh. A big pound of flesh, I should say, many pounds of flesh.
Ali Shahabi with the Arabia Foundation, a pro-Saudi think tank, says the sheer scale of corruption was draining Saudi Arabia's budget, and the kingdom needed to change how it was doing business.
And to do that, you needed some form of shock therapy.
And now that the shock has passed, there are questions about why key government ministers, top royals, and internationally known businessmen disappeared for 3 months. Shahabi says the government needed to take drastic measures, even if they were outside the legal system.
To have taken 300 members of the elite and gone through a full detailed legal procedure with them would have taken years and would have frozen the country into suspense, really, as everybody just was focused on these trials.
The crackdown on corruption was spearheaded by Saudi Arabia's new crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. It's part of his ambitious plan to overhaul the economy and create new industries and infrastructure projects. That takes money. The $100+ billion collected from those who were detained will help, says Rachel Ziemba, who consults with businesses in the region.
The big question people are asking with this shakedown, if we can call it that, has been a question of, do they need money, and do they need money urgently?
Ziemba says Saudi Arabia currently has about $500 billion in cash reserves and oil assets. Its economy has also bounced back a bit from a couple years ago, when oil prices plummeted and the kingdom was burning through $10 billion a month of its reserves.
My analysis is that they're not running out of money imminently, but they're looking over the longer term, and they're very well aware that they can't continue with business as usual.
The government has introduced stringent austerity measures, raising the cost of water, food, and gasoline. It's hoping to entice foreign investment to help expand the kingdom beyond oil. But the dramatic nature of the crackdown rattled confidence of foreign investors, worried about a lack of due process and transparency. The Arabia Foundation's Shahabi says that fear will not last long.
The government will have to draw a red line behind this process, which I think they're trying to do now, to say that this was an extraordinary event, it cannot happen again, and the past will be put behind us.
That's a message the Crown Prince may carry with him when he visits the U.S., the UK, and France in the next few weeks. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
You're listening to All Things Considered on WNYC. If you watched the Super Bowl last night, you may have seen an ad featuring the words and the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Well, that ad has sparked a debate, reignited a debate, in fact, over the proper use of Dr. King's speeches. Coming up next, we'll consider that issue with David Garrow, a Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer of Dr. King. That conversation is just ahead. Stay tuned.
WNYC is supported by John Lithgow, Stories by Heart, now on Broadway. John Lithgow portrays his favorite characters in this celebration of the power of storytelling. Stories by Heart through March 4th. Tickets at roundabouttheater.org. Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, presenting its Design Access Lab. 2 weeks of learning through workshops, films, dance, and more for visitors of all abilities through February 16th. More at cooperhewitt.org.
Michael Wolff, author of Fire and Fury, had unprecedented access to the Trump White House.
Day after day, you see how the people closest to the president react. You saw a panic building.
Join Alec Baldwin for a live taping of Here's the Thing. He'll talk with Michael Wolff about Trump, Bannon, and where the administration goes from here. Tomorrow night at the Town Hall. Tickets at wnyc.org/events.
Indonesian Christians in central New Jersey have won a reprieve from deportation for now. Tomorrow Morning Edition, WNYC reports on their legal case to stay in the U.S. and avoid returning to a country where Christian persecution is on the rise. Join us for that story and the information you'll need to start your day on Morning Edition tomorrow, right here on WNYC. Tonight, mostly clear, lows down in the low 20s, and tomorrow cloudy in the morning, and then it will gradually become mostly sunny and warmer too, with a high near 40 degrees. Currently, it's 31 degrees, and it's mostly clear in Central Park. The time is 5:20.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from LogMeIn, makers of GoToMeeting, a collaborative meeting platform with over 18 million monthly users, designed to connect people from anywhere in the world on any device. Learn more at gotomeeting.com. And Subaru, committed to doing its part to make the world a better place by supporting philanthropic initiatives in local communities. Learn more at subaru.com/lovepromise. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. President Trump visited a manufacturer outside of Cincinnati, Ohio today to sell the new tax law, saying it would be good for workers and the U.S. economy. But that's not the headline from the president's speech. President Trump strayed from the topic to attack Democrats with the controversy over dueling memos and the Russia investigation. And the stock market dropped more than 1,000 points this afternoon. NPR White House correspondent Tamara Keith joins us now from the White House. Hi, Tam.
Hi.
Let's start where we ended last week with the Republican memo that was released by the House Intelligence Committee. Over the weekend, President Trump claimed that it vindicated him. He tweeted about it again this morning. And so the debate now is over releasing a Democratic rebuttal memo. What is the president's position on that?
Yeah, and so Republicans in Congress, as well as Democrats, we should say, disagree with his claim that the Republican memo vindicated him with regards to the Russia investigation. So he tweeted about the Republican chairman of the Intelligence Committee, calling him a man of tremendous courage and grit, and then he described the top Democrat on the committee as little and a liar and a leaker who must be stopped. During his speech this afternoon, seemingly completely out of nowhere, President Trump, we think, referenced the Republican memo. Listen to this.
Did we catch them in the act or what? You know what I'm talking about. Oh, did we catch them in the act? They are very embarrassed. They never thought they were going to get caught. We caught them. Hey, we caught them. Well, it's so much fun. Like the Great Sleuth.
It's safe to say that the president probably won't have as much fun with the Democratic rebuttal memo, but if the Intelligence Committee votes to release it, the president
would then have to sign off on its release and declassify it. The White House insists that despite the tweets and all these other things, that memo will be considered in the same way that the GOP memo was considered last week.
And in the speech, President Trump also went after Democrats for not clapping enough during his State of the Union address last week, a speech in which he said he wants to work with Democrats. Set this up for us.
Yeah, so this was an official event. It was really not supposed to be a political event. It was supposed to be one of those teleprompter speeches where the president talked about the Republican tax cuts. And then he started talking about the upcoming elections, and then he moved on to complain about how Democrats had sat stone-faced during much of his State of the Union address last week. He said he didn't even want to look at them because of the, quote, bad energy.
They were like death.